Yeah. So welcome everyone to MK Global's Finship 2.0 Investors Conference, and this is the last session of the day. And we are pleased to have with us today Anjali Rathore, Chief Digital Officer of India's largest private sector bank, which is HDFC Bank. In this fireside chat session, we will discuss the bank's envisioned journey to transform into a full-scale techno bank, which the new CEO Shashi has talked about. Anjali, the first question is, Shashi has talked about, transforming HDFC Bank into a techno bank. We would like to know how you envision this techno bank and also the plan this transformation while maintaining, tech edge on all front and all the time. There is one more question which is attached to this is that can you also talk about the digital factory and the, enterprise factory concept?
Good evening, Anand, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here on this platform. Shashi has already spoken about our vision in some of the earlier conversations that he's had. Just would like to share a little bit on what this is all about. See, as a bank, we do three things. We onboard a customer, then we allow the customer to transact, and then last thing is the servicing of the customer. No matter which product, which service we take, these are the three things that we do as far as the customer experience is concerned. And in each of these areas, there are several friction points which exist today. If you look at any banking journey, there are friction points which make the whole process a little more difficult today. And for example, if you want to onboard a customer, there is a KYC process which has to be followed. If you're taking somebody for an asset journey, then you have to do credit underwriting. These are all points of friction as far as the customer is concerned. And we have to simplify these friction points so that we can easily onboard a customer in a very intuitive manner. So if we look at a traditional bank, which has been there for ages, running things with even the latest technologies, there is always an opportunity to improve these customer touchpoints and engagements. And if we keep this in mind, the entire digitization of the bank is driven towards this. How do we become more customer focused, customer centric, so that we are able to easily onboard customers onto our various journeys? We are able to provide them transaction support 24/7 wherever they need it. And should there be a need for any service, how do we enable that anytime for our customers? And this, if we look at every product and service that we have within the bank, we have to do this across all products and services within the bank. This is the journey of digitizing the bank that we are undertaking today. It's not a journey that has started today. It has started some time ago. But it is a journey. You start if there are 30 new products to be covered in this. There are a certain number of products and services which are covered. Some will get covered. That is the whole process. The other part of this journey is building completely new digital capabilities. One is about digitizing the bank. The other is about building completely new digital capabilities. If we were a startup born today and would be doing banking, would we do the same way as we are doing today? Or does it give us an opportunity to start with a clean white sheet of paper and reimagine everything? We have no legacy, no baggage. How do we build those kind of capabilities? And that's the other piece of the puzzle, where we are looking at some of our key platforms and seeing how best can we recreate, reimagine banking if we have to do it from start with no baggage, no legacy. So these are the two pillars. Once this is clear, then it comes down to what kind of execution muscle do we need to do this kind of work. Traditionally, in a bank, we've always had a technology team, IT team, which is working, trying to build various platforms and services. Is that good enough, or do we need to do something differently? And that is where the answer comes, that we have to build new capabilities, bring in new skills, look at new technologies, and even change the our ways of working. And that is where digital factory comes in and enterprise factory comes in. And what are we doing here with digital factory and enterprise factory? Digital factory reimagines banking. So if we have to have a payments capability or a payments app, how should it look like? And that entire reimagination is done over there. How will we build it? What's the journey going to look like? What is the customer experience? How will we service the customer? Do we make it 100% DIY, do it yourself? Will it be an assisted journey on a telephone call? Would it be a walk-in journey at a branch? So we look at it from that perspective, and that reimagination work and choosing the new technologies, new ways of working, bringing in new people is being done in Digital Factory. But anything that we build will talk to the core systems, because that is a must. If you create a liabilities product, it will go into our core banking. If we create a new payments product or a card product, it will go into our credit card systems. Now, if it has to talk to the systems which are there within the bank, we need a middle capability, a middleware somewhere in between, which will allow all these new experiences, amazing experiences to talk to the banking systems, which are in some way, which have been there within the bank for so long. And that is where Enterprise Factory comes in, where we are going to build our APIs, which will connect with the engagement layer. We are going to modernize the core. There are areas where technology needs to be refreshed. That work is being done by the Enterprise Factory. So we have a 3-tiered structure. One is the traditional conventional IT, which is managing the entire technology which is there within the bank. And then we have on the top the Digital Factory, which is reimagining the new experiences and building the engagement with the customer. And in between is the Enterprise Factory, which is taking all the services of the bank and exposing it to the new experience customer. That's how we have thought through of execution for the future.
Sure. You've also talked about the project Future Ready and the Digital Initiative 2.0. Certainly, there is an RBI embargo at this point of time on Digital Initiative 2.0. But can you elaborate on these two concepts?
Yeah. So, anything that we are reimagining and building from a customer's perspective, those programs we had clubbed as, Digital 2.0. This is an overarching umbrella, if you may call it a nomenclature that we had given. And this is how we were reimagining each of these pieces. Now that is something that, RBI has come back and said, we need to fix some of the other pieces before we can do it. But that doesn't mean that the digitization journey is anyway not moving. Those things are to be done. For example, if there is a system which needs to be refreshed, if there is a failure point within or a friction point in a journey that needs to be fixed, that's business as usual. That is continuing. But some of the revamped, like, if you talk about, if you want to revamp a complete new platform or build something which is very, very different from how we do banking today, those are some of the things where we cannot launch it right now, but nothing stops us from working on it and getting ready towards the launch. And at some point of time when it is completely allowed by the regulator, then we will be able to bring some of those capabilities into the market.
Sure. And by when, I mean, any timeline that you feel before which basically RBI could allow or basically lift this embargo?
Actually, whatever was asked for, we have done most of it. There has been an audit which is going on, which is just concluding, and we have submitted all the information and details. Now it is up to the regulator to look at all the pieces of information which is there and take calls. It will be hard for us to guess at this point of time.
No problem. I think now RBI has to come back on this.
Yes, we are complying with whatever is being asked for. So we've given.
Sure. We have also talked about, migration to cloud. Every bank is now talking about migration to cloud. There are people who are giving numbers as well as to what percentage of their tech stack actually has moved to cloud. Can you elaborate on our plan, particularly to migrate onto the cloud, and any international experience that you can talk about how their migration has happened and how that basically has helped in terms of the overall improvement in terms of the offering that they have to the customers?
So see, the concept of cloud migration is not new. This is something which has been there for few years now, and a lot of tech savvy organizations have actually moved to cloud. There are two ways to run a business. One, you create an application and you create your own bare metal servers, etc., in your data center, put everything over there connected to the internet and run it. But you have to think back that is that the core job? Should we be doing that? Or should we be building good experiences for our customer and deploying it in cloud where it will work in an equally good manner, if not more, and safely? So that is one choice that every organization has to make at some point of time. In banking, especially because it's a regulated industry, there are choices that we have to make considering the security, considering the data localization, residency. So some of these pieces have to be considered very well before any application moves in the cloud. And up till a few years ago, those options were not available. Many times these good global technology clouds were available outside of India. But now those big players who do this work very well around the world are in India, setting up local data centers here, which gives you the resiliency, the ability to scale up, the safety and security, which is really needed to protect data. Those capabilities are now coming into India, and we are seeing that that is available at a scale and at a level where it can be leveraged for financial services as well. And therefore, this whole push that now is the time to move into and leverage some of the capabilities which are available. So we are starting and embarking this on this journey, but it is not that the entire bank will lift and shift and put it in the cloud. That doesn't happen, because when we have built systems over a period of time, it is locked to a certain kind of hardware. There's some things are running on engineered systems. It cannot be moved so easily. So not everything will go onto the cloud. First of all, that part should be clear. But what is good is that any new things that we are building, can we make it cloud native so that it doesn't need to be ported later? So all new capabilities and platforms that we are building, we are ensuring that it is cloud native. It is microservices enabled. It's a zero trust architecture. It is safe and secure. Data is adequately encrypted. Those are the things that we are doing, and the journey begins with putting the new things there. Then we look at of what things that we have, what is amenable for cloud. So there are some pieces which have been built over the last few years, which can actually move to cloud with a proper containerization, what we call a way to move into cloud. Those things are possible. So wherever we can do that, those pieces are coming in next. But in the end, no matter how much we work on, it's not that 100% all workloads will move to cloud. That is not going to happen. There will be pieces which will be inside the custody of our data centers. Some pieces will be in cloud, hybrid cloud, as we call it. And that's how most of the organizations will have their journey. But somebody who's getting born today will be born cloud native. They would not simply go back into own data center.
Yeah, and any international experience that you can talk about, because I'm sure you would have tracked it very closely.
Yes. I mean, there are banks, globally who have done this very well. In fact, very recently, the entire core banking, which was there in the data center of a Singapore bank, has moved 100%, and their scale is not small; it's pretty big. So there are organizations that are moving. In the US, there are banks which have already undertaken this journey. And not withstanding the new ones. These are large established banks who've got a big customer base, and they have moved successfully.
Sure, that's very helpful. So we had a Singapore-based bank in the last session, and they were talking about that migration. Can you throw more light on the AAA framework that you have talked in the past, where you were talking about building APIs, apps, and analytics? And how will it really help in the bank transition into a techno bank?
So if you just refer to the vision that we've got, that we want to build good customer experiences on platforms which are new age, new technologies. We want to build exceptional experience for our customers. That experience layer is the applications. And that application need to talk to our core systems, which is the core systems that we have on core banking or our payment systems or loan management system. Those need to connect with that, and that is where in the middle comes the APIs. So we have apps and the APIs, which allows you to speak to the core system. Once that is done, then functionally the entire product is ready. Now it has to be run in a very smart manner. So if, let's take an example that we want somebody to open a savings account in a frictionless manner. The regulator had last year come up with a video KYC, which was a big enabler for removing friction, because the KYC is a big friction point. How easy can we make it? So video KYC was a fantastic enablement that came from the regulator. We created that entire capability of opening a full savings account sitting in the comfort of your home, looking at your mobile phone, you click on a link and you go through this entire journey. That is the application. But when you open the current account, that or savings account, that goes inside the core banking using the APIs, and that is the API layer. Data layer comes in when it says that who do I send that link to? Do I just do a mass marketing just like a lot of people do that? The answer is no. There we have to dig into the data that we have, where we identify customers who we should be sending that link to. And that data that comes from within the bank, we put our intelligence on top of it, run models to identify that if you have to open a savings account, these are the customers who we see that they send every month so much of money to their spouse whose account is somewhere else. So can we open their account? Then that money is going to stay within our bank. And that is how we identify. So data analytics is actually used for targeting as far as the customers are concerned. It is also used for fraud prevention. It's very, very important, because if you are trying to access a certain transaction using a phone where you've just changed a device and even the SIM is different, and we get to know that using the analytics which we have, then we want to prevent that transaction because something is wrong. How can you have a device which is different, SIM which is different, and you're doing a transaction at, let's say, God forsake, an hour at night? Then those are the kind of tools and technology that we use using data for fraud prevention, for personalization, and that's where the analytics comes into play. So it's a combination of application, APIs, and analytics, which helps us complete the digitization journey around any particular product or service.
Sure. There was a bank in a session. We're talking about how the banks basically want to follow the Gandalf. Gandalf means basically the Google, the Amazons of the world. And we already have a platform, which is SmartBuy platform, where we allow our customers basically to experience and transact and connect to those platforms as well. So can you elaborate on that platform more? And basically, what is the purpose of having that platform? How do you integrate and how do you want to scale it up?
So SmartBuy was our foray into ensuring that our customers actually get one place to see all the offers that we bring in for our customers. So you may have a credit card and debit card, and you're of course free to go and use it wherever you want. But is there a place where we can enable all our customers to come and use that? Is there a place where they can see what are the various offers that is there and use it? So our customers can actually bring in the various products and services that we have at one place to see all the offers and then transact over there. That was the whole idea. And when you transact, you get points as well. So you are earning when you're using that. And then later on, to redeem the point, you go back to the same catalog, you go back to the same offers area. So it's a journey from earn to burn for all our customers. And that's the place where our customers come. And when we launched it a few years ago, we saw good traction. It's a multi-category, multi-partner. So you have even the large aggregators like Amazon or Flipkart, everybody is a part of that. And our customers get that ability to go there and use their credit card, debit card to get the good offers, which is there. we saw that, for the last 3 years, if we track, the growth has been phenomenal. In the last 3 years, I would say the growth has been like 10x on this particular platform, and it is growing. So every time, it is so convenient that you can use all the products and services, especially the payment products and services, and go there, use it, you're getting benefits, then you earn points, then you go back and redeploy those points at the same place. That is a fantastic experience and a good thing that our customers are using. And we see that we have to do more of that to ensure that they get best value out of the bank.
Sure. That's good to hear about that platform. One more question was about that HDFC Bank has been pretty strong on the retail front. There is a peer bank which is now talking about, and there are a lot of ads that they keep giving about the SME and the corporate digi stack.
Yes.
Can you tell us basically how are we do we have similar kind of a stack, and how are we performing on that?
Yes. So see, when digitization comes in, it comes into a place where you need standardization. Yeah. So retail is a very good place to start digitization. There are millions of customers. You want to improve the journey, you bring in first there, you solve it for one customer and then replicate across millions. On the other extreme are the large corporate customers, where it's a lot more bespoke, because it's relationship driven. You need people to go to, because every transaction is unique. So there it's on the other extreme is the large corporates who will need support, which is bespoke. But in between is this large mass of small and medium enterprises who can benefit from very similar pieces that are getting built on the retail side. So if we take a customer's focus and say that let's say there is a small motorcycle dealer in a small town, and that person has got a three people in organization. That person has to do all the things, right? Has to pay to their employees, has to do reconciliation, has sold several motorcycles, expecting payments. Some are on EMI, what has come, what has not come, has to do accounting. So these small enterprises need not really have a large organization with a CA to do all the work. So that is where this SME capability comes into play, where you can provide banking, but at the same time, it is so simplified that those same small customers also see a lot of value in some of these activities which come up, that is a day-to-day problem. And when they pick up a platform like what you're referring to, that becomes the digitization of an SME. And here, the good part is that not everything comes from the bank. Effectively, bank is only providing the banking services, the accounts, the payment services, etc. A lot of this reconciliation, salary payment capability is coming from third party. And that third party could be one of the fintechs who's doing it. So we hear of so many fintechs who are doing reconciliation, who are doing salary processing. So it's a combination of what is being done within the bank and what is available outside of the bank with some smart technology companies, merge it together, package it, and bring it for the customer. So that whole thing is what is about the SME banking and how it is going in. And why just some of the banks who are actually bringing it out in the market, but even we are doing a lot of that. It's just that we are not talking about many of these things which is there, because largely it's also it's a combination. Not everything is coming from our stable. It's a lot of it is coming also from various partners. So that is how this whole combo is working. So on one extreme for the retail, everything is being done by us. We are digitizing it and then massifying it. On the other extreme is the bespoke banking which is going on, and in middle is actually a banking which is happening with a lot of partnerships going around.
Okay, but I think we need to do a bit of marketing on that front as well, because I think we are also going more corporate, as we see. In the conference we had a lot of fintechs, and there were rural fintechs as well. And just want to understand from your perspective, because HDFC Bank is there into urban, is also into rural. So how do you plan to leverage technology, particularly into the rural areas? where some fintechs at least have made really good inroads. Do you see any challenges and opportunities, when you deal with these kind of rural customers in terms of offering your digibanking or techno product for them?
Actually, rural and semi-urban is a big thrust area for the bank, and we really want to push that envelope as much as we can. Technology is definitely going to help extend that reach in a big manner. So if you look at digital distribution, branch is one way to reach those customers, but there is a limit to how many branches you can open and how quickly you can do. But there are digital distribution models which are possible, and what you're referring to with various fintechs who are already present there, they have a good footfall of customers who are coming in. We look at them as complementing some of the capabilities that we have. So is there a way for us to connect with these fintechs and push our products and services? It is possible. But when we do that, there are some things which are core to banking, KYC, we have to do it. If there is a new customer who's coming in, credit underwriting, we have to do it and do it well. A lot of these customers who are coming in, we will have to ensure that we at the back end also have the capability to do a very quick underwriting, very quick KYC for these customers in a safe and secure manner, so that we are able to bring in the right products and services for them. Also, when it comes to servicing these customers, it is easy to have a branch and where people can walk in, but many of these customers will see or find branches which are much further off from where they are. So over there, then the digital servicing capability has to be there, because a lot of these customers will face, some questions, queries, some support which is needed on various products and services. So we definitely want to push this, that leverage the complementarity which comes from fintech, but at the same time, centrally, we'll also have to build a lot of these new muscles to ensure that we are able to support that kind of expansion. So we are doing both actually today. We are building these capabilities internally to support this kind of expansion, and partnering with some of the fintechs which is there, partnering not just with fintechs, with also companies that have got a good distribution. So we partnered recently with CSC, you may have followed. They've got a good distribution reach. Now that is not only human led, it's a combination of apps, APIs, analytics, and people. It's a combination of that which is moving in. And we are seeing some good traction in the market as well.
Sure, good to hear, because most of the fintechs that were there, everybody talking about partnering with the NBFCs and small banks, because they also have dominating positions with these guys. Sure. What is your view on your WhatsApp, AI banking, and BNPL product, which has become a really buzzword in the fintech world and in the banking space as well? Are we also doing that kind of a BNPL product? Because I believe that we have a debit card-led BNPL product.
Yes.
What is your view on these, chat-based banking, WhatsApp banking, AI banking? And
so we are leveraging WhatsApp as a channel. See, just like, if you think of it, there are 400 million Indians who are using WhatsApp. So that's possibly one of the most opened app which people are using for communication. So why not leverage that for offering banking services over there? So if you want to check your balance, you should be able to do it on WhatsApp. So if you want to get some service, you want to block your card because you lost something, you should be able to do it on WhatsApp. You need not walk into a bank branch. So we are enabling our service journeys on WhatsApp, and that's already available. So in fact, we are one of the first few banks in the world which has enabled WhatsApp, and not just as a text channel, but as a tap channel. So you can see a very nice, a widget appear on WhatsApp, and you can just choose and tap. So you don't really need to type anything over there. So that makes the user journey even simpler. And this is what we are doing today. Our customer journeys of support is moving on to WhatsApp. We are not using that for any kind of an acquisition of a new customer or onboarding, because there are some things which still have to be solved for. So WhatsApp, just like we have SMS as a channel of communication, WhatsApp is another channel. We are definitely using it. Voice is the other channel. A lot of people come through social media. If they want any service, they are typing it there that, hey, I need this kind of a help. Then we reach out and solve for that problem. But WhatsApp is something which is very potent. We have seen good traction coming in. It's an important channel that should be used. On the AI side, we are bringing in artificial intelligence in few of the things. For example, this WhatsApp chat. Now, the way you type is different from the way I may be typing. What you want is different from, there has to be somebody at the back end who is understanding the intent and responding to it. And that has to be accurate. Now, those are some of the areas where we use technology, which is artificial intelligence in some way, and respond. And this learns also. So for the first 100,000 transactions, it is learning and it's improving. So the accuracy of response and everything keeps going up with every new transaction which is coming in. And that's where a lot of AI is getting used, largely on the service side, not so much on sales side or anything on the corporate side, but servicing a customer, we are leveraging AI. And you also mentioned one of the last things,
BNPL.
BNPL. So BNPL is another form of credit. If you look at the credit pyramid, there's a credit card at the top, which is a small number of customers who are having this. They're using it. There is enough growth available over there, and it is growing, followed by a big middle, which is a personal loan, unsecured loans, which are happening. And then there is a bottom of the pyramid, which is BNPL today. And this segment is, though small, it is growing really, really fast at this point of time. And this is where we are enabling this capability at all the touch points for our customers. So if you have a debit card with us, and if you are doing a transaction, you have the ability to choose a product on a BNPL. So if you're buying a refrigerator, you may say that, okay, you want to pay it in 3 EMIs, you'll pay later. Those are the choices which are available. So we are extending BNPL with our merchant partners, especially the online ones where it is very effective. Even at offline POS, we have BNPL capability now available for our customers. So you can choose to pay with your credit card, or you pay with your debit card, or you pay with your debit card with BNPL capability, which is there.
No, interesting point on this is that one of the BNPL players said that when you have a BNPL attached with a debit card, at the end of the day, basically customer has a balance and he's going to pay from that. So what is in it for a merchant? Basically, merchant is looking to partner with somebody on a BNPL front. If somebody gets a credit, money which doesn't have, and he's ready to spend so that he gets more sales.
So this is exactly what the debit card BNPL capability provides. So I may be having 20,000 in my account. I'm buying a TV for 35,000. I may choose to say that I will take a BNPL credit on this and do the transaction. Alternatively, I may have 35,000 rupees. I may still choose to take it on a BNPL rather than just pay directly. So that option is available to our customers. But if you have enough money, you want to just swipe the transaction over there, that's also available, and that's customers' money. They have the choice to do that.
Okay.
But it does create a new market, because sometimes you may have money, you may not have money, but you want to buy something, you want to buy it on a lean credit, which is available.
But then it is restricted mainly to our own customers, because only our customers will have a debit card. Right?
Yes, it is restricted to our own customers today. New to credit customers or new to bank customers, we now have the capability to do underwriting on the fly, but there the customer will have to give some information before we take that call. So that capability is also available, and you will see that coming onto offline POS also very soon, where a customer who's not belonging to our bank can also do that. But this requires an online underwriting, which is a friction point, which is there today.
Now, a question related to that is basically you have had a fintech collaboration recently, I mean, a partnership, I would say, with Paytm. Can you elaborate on what is it for HDFC Bank in terms of the customer acquisition, merchants, lending, liabilities? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So Paytm has got a good franchise. They've built a good franchise of both merchants, and they have a large customer base as well. Now, if you look at the customer base, and I'm just looking at the issuance side with the customer base, this gives us the ability to, let's say, issue credit cards to their customers. So a customer might be walking in on their app, and it has the ability to take a credit card instantly. By filling in the details, we would have done the credit underwriting, on the fly, and you can get a digital credit card instantly on your mobile app. Should you wish to get a physical one also, you can just tap and request for it. It'll be shipped to your home. So this large base of customer that is there, they have the ability to take a card from HDFC Bank immediately on their own. It is a DIY capability which is there. On the other side, Paytm has also got a large base of merchants. Now, though most of those merchants are accepting payment using a QR code, which is largely UPI, that is one way of making payment. But the other way is also that if we can enable that a credit card or a debit card payment can also happen at the same merchants, then that whole rail which has been set up, the infrastructure, can also enable a credit card payment. And credit card payment is value accretive. So I may be a customer who has a Paytm app. I have the ability to scan the QR code and pay at a certain merchant. I can also link my credit card, which is a tokenized form of the card, and I can pay using that in a very similar experience. You don't have to take your card out and swipe it at that merchant. Just scan the QR and that same money moves through a credit card. So the rail and the experience which is there for UPI, that same rail and experience can be used for making a credit card payment, which is a win-win for both sides. So it's a large franchise of merchants and customer base, which can be leveraged with the products that the bank has. And it's a win-win proposition for both sides.
Sure. Apart from that, so basically, we have seen RBI, the government talking about a bill on crypto. There are talks about crypto banking. There are talks about that CBDC will be brought in. Long back, we had a gentleman, expert who talking about that once CBDCs do come in, basically the current account deposits will really vanish. Those kind of comments do keep coming. So what is your view on the overall, cryptos, crypto banking and CBDCs?
So, first of all, in India, I think we are very fortunate to be in a country where the technology has come to a level where transacting in money is very simple. So today, virtually, you may put 100 rupees inside a bank account, but now you have a phone which is linked to that bank account, and you are doing all those transactions digitally. You're tapping your phone and paying. So, in some way, you've got the experience which a digital currency brings in. While there was a physical currency which you went and kept in the bank, but it got linked to your phone and app digitally. So that kind of an experience we are able to mimic, which a digital currency brings in. Now, digital currency is being worked across the world. It's being worked by a lot of private parties, and some of those digital currencies, it's a question of who has the ability to create a new currency and roll it out in the market. We believe the sovereign has the right today to do that. And that is how the power of the currency comes in. So if sovereign has the right and sovereign wants to build a digital currency, that is CBDC, which is, central bank digital currency. And Indian regulator has been talking about it. There is a lot of thinking which is going in what form and shape it has to be brought in. But whenever it comes in, we will definitely participate in that. The banking system is going to participate in it. What impact it will have? Will all the bank balances disappear and go into the phone? I think it's too premature to say anything about it. See, there is a reason why you keep money into the bank. There is a reason why bank has a role today. I don't think any of those will get challenged. That entire system gets revamped in a different manner. Just think of it. Today we are printing currency. Tomorrow we will have tokenized currency. So that token is going to reside on your phone, but that token still has to be created by the central bank. It has to be distributed by the scheduled banks which are there, and it has to be serviced by scheduled bank. So the role of the entities in the entire financial system is established. Not all the roles are going to disappear. It's just the form factor of that currency is going to disappear. The way it is getting used is going to be is going to change, but that role is going to very much be there unless we, our pilot brings out a very different result.
Sure. Any views on the recent RBI working group report on digital lending space? And there is even a Niti Aayog report now talking about digital only banks. Any views that you can share on that?
Well, the working group report on digital lending, it is, it's quite an eye opener because there was a lot of lending happening through these digital apps, etc. So that working group clearly calls out that what is right and what is not right. And clearly it is also defining the roles of each of the parties. So there is a need for improving the customer experience through these apps, which is there because that is what reduces the friction and brings the customer to use it very simply. But at the back end, there has to be a regulated entity who is lending it. And there is a back end entity who's got a role of collections, underwriting, all that thing has to be very, very clear. The roles and responsibilities cannot be muddied, which is there in some cases. There are strong recommendations. So there are some things like FLDG, which is happening today in the market. Those things will get questioned and there will be a model which will have to work in the right manner with the regulated entities coming into play. So it's not that a lot of digital lending will not be there. It will be there. It will be in a proper manner where each party has a role and obligation to fulfill as well, and it will be properly regulated. So I think it will be good for the long-term future of digital lending, and if some of these things comes into play. That is on the working group side. And on the digital banking side, this is Niti Aayog's paper, which has come out. See, this is not new, digital banks. Whatever we are talking largely in India is digitizing of a bank, which has been running over a period of time. There are some instances where we have a very nice front end coming in, but that front end again goes and talks to the same infrastructure of the bank, which is there. This is digitization of a bank. A digital bank would be something which is creating and establishing a completely new operating model of a bank. Banking is pretty simple, right? There are people who come in, give their deposit, and there are people who come and ask for money. You lend it, and this whole thing, how can it be simplified? Can we do it in a manner that people can just use a technology website or an app? They're able to open an account, put money. Somebody who needs a personal loan is able to again go to the same place and take a personal loan. The underwriting is on the fly. The entire process is on the fly. You don't need to speak to anyone to do this. You don't need to speak to anyone for getting serviced. There is no operation support. There is no failure because everything is being done by technology. So that operating model, if we are able to bring into play, this will extend the reach of financial inclusion. So today, there are reasons why every village doesn't have a bank, because there is a cost to bringing banking to the last mile. And with a digital banking operating model, it will be possible to penetrate that across all the 1.2, 1.3 billion people that we have, and they'll be able to access banking in a much more seamless manner using technology. So you will have bank in your hand, and you can reach out to bank 24/7. You can put a deposit, you can take loan. You will be able to do 100% banking using a digital bank at some point of time. So I think that paper is quite good. It's talking about these operating model. Let's see how this proceeds for the future.
So the HDFC Bank as a techno bank will be somewhat very similar to the digital bank.
See, as I mentioned in the beginning, that our vision is to do both. We have to digitize our banks. So today, all our customers are on the bank that we have today. Whereas we are working on digital programs as well, which is going to change the customer experience. So it's a twin strategy for us. We are going to work on both sides. As and when there is the right time to bring in a completely new digital platform, we'll be very happy to do that immediately.
Sure. And when you really talk about building a techno bank, I think all the employees, not only the digital team, but all the employees will really have to scale up, or basically skill up to do this digital banking. So how are we as a digital team interacting with the HR and ensuring that basically we have front end, we have the middle end and the back end. Every person over there operating into the space understands the transformation that we are looking at in terms of techno banking. How do we interact with the HRs?
Yes, absolutely. So, transforming a bank into digital bank is not just done by any one team or just by bringing one technology. It is something which has got all aspects to it. You of course bring in new skills because you need new people to come in with some of the skills that are required, but you bring in new ways of working. So how you work across the bank is very important. We have product teams, we have technology teams, which is building, we have digital team, which is conceptualizing certain things. So it is a new ways of working which has to come in. And of course, there are new technologies which are being used. And for each of these areas, there is a full transformation of people and culture which is needed. And that is an undergoing journey which is there. So we have a lot of people who are, upgrading their skills, learning newer skills of managing things. And that is where we stay largely focused on how do we bring in the right people culture to usher in the digital that we have envisioned. And that's where our CEO also spends a lot of time. If you look at our CEO's top few priorities, technology is at the top, people is at the top, compliance is at the top, customer service is at the top. So these are some of the things where the entire bank is focused on.
Yeah. No, lastly, I want to ask, what is your view on work from home and work from anywhere culture, which a lot of entities are not talking about, and even some of the banks are talking about. So one is that allowing that, and secondly is that technologically whether that is possible in terms of building capabilities. And third, any regulatory hurdle, particularly in a setup for a bank, particularly whether you can have that kind of a culture.
So on work from home, thankfully everybody has experienced it now. So everybody has a viewpoint, and we also understand very clearly where work from home is impactful and where work from home may not, continue in the way it is continuing today. So it's actually horses for the courses. There are some roles that can be done very well from home. There are some roles that requires people to meet with customers. It requires people to come to office to do. And, accordingly, we are not sweeping anything with one brush saying everybody can work from home or everybody. It's a mix today. As we go in this mode, there are certain things that, first of all, compliance and security has to be there. So that part is clearly, we are not going to compromise in any manner. There are system accesses which are needed from home, which can only be done in a safe and a secure manner. So if we are able to do that, then that role could move to work from home. But then in certain cases, we are not able to do that. Then customer has to come to, or our people have to move to a premise to do that. So it's actually a mix right at this point of time. We cannot just say that all roles can work from home or all roles will, but we are finding a good balance there. We have found quite a few things that can be done equally from home as it can be done from office. And, especially on the bespoke side where you need a touch with the customer, you need to talk to people, you need to be with your colleagues. Some of those things we continue to work from office also.
Thanks, Anjani. It's been almost 50 minutes. Thanks for speaking your mind out, heart out on all the topics and providing the insights. Thank you for providing us an opportunity to host you. And we look forward to similar interactions going forward as well.
Thank you so much, Anand. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And best wishes, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you so much. You have a good weekend too.
Thank you all, participants.